half of HR professionals report spending 1 to 5 hours every week on conflict resolution and employee relations issues. Reframing not only your approach to this, but also your perspective can really be the key in taking charge of your HR career and leading and growing on purpose. Today on the show, we have Megan Robinson. She's founder of eLeader Experience and a certified John Maxwell trainer. In our conversation, she shares her insights on elevating leadership and transcending traditional boundaries, shifting from business parenting to business leading, and discovering our true leadership style. If you enjoy today's conversation, make sure you like and subscribe to make sure you don't miss a future episode. Megan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Brittany, for having me. I am so excited to be here.
So, Megan, would you like to introduce the idea of business parenting and business leading before we get into the questions of today?
Absolutely, Brittany. So I personally found myself having a lot of language when I was going through my own leadership journey and leadership challenges. I started reflecting on some of the language that I was using. And to me, I actually wasn't quite pleased with it because I felt all of my frustrations are the things that made me feel like I was being someone's parent instead of being their leader. I felt like I was babysitting my team. I was sheltering them. I was cleaning up their messes. They were always looking for permission from me. I was trying to spoon feed them information. We talked about training wheels. And I looked at all of this language and I said, wow, this is not the type of language that I would say to a professional, right? That's not peers. That's not how I want to treat my team. And so I really came up with this thought of business parenting and what is it? And for me, I wanted to take that parallel to parenting because most of us as leaders really want to see our team grow, mature to fruition. I know you just had someone on your team that went to that next step and that next stage. And it's exciting. Like a proud parent, you watch someone grow and develop before your eyes. But instead of taking this negative context and always having those negative aspects of parenting, I looked at it through the lens of how can we apply the best parenting skills if that correlates with most excellent leadership. And of course it does. So there are some really great ways that we can look at the parenting lens and the leadership lens and take those lessons from both worlds so that we're giving our team exactly what they need and we're really raising high performance teams in the best way possible without that frustration, without that negative parenting language, and we all get to be more proud.
I love that. And I think for us as HR leaders, we have a lot of hats. When I teach the Sherman HR Department of One class, we often talk about what hats do you wear most often? We are the firefighters. We are the party planners. We are the magicians. We are the hall monitors, the safety police. But parenting is a hat that we wear as well, for lack of a better term, just because we do have to set the rules, enforce the rules, and people come to us from a consultative standpoint, asking us for advice, whether they're leaders or whether they're employees. So the topic of business parenting versus business leading is fascinating to me. And I'm so glad to have you here to talk about this today.
Well, I love that correlation too, because it feels like one of the hats you're wearing is parent. And I want to challenge everyone that's feeling that way, right? You're in the trenches with it. If you switch that language for yourself and one, recognize when you're in that space, but two, recognize that that's also your opportunity for leadership. Whether you're a department of one or you're a department of many, everyone has the ability to have leadership in their role. And it's either self-leadership or it is leading those teams, but how you're showing up in those instances, that is your leadership opportunity. And if you're approaching it always as kind of this rundown, tired, annoyed parent, you are going to miss out on those opportunities to really shine and to really lead your team to greatness. So that's where I feel like those lessons from parenting and those lessons of leadership of how do you be the most effective business parent or business leader really start to shine through.
I think there's a lot of words that we use, and parent is one of those loaded words that can sometimes have a feeling assigned to them. So for those of us in the room or those who are watching, would you say that it's wrong to feel like a business parent, or how should we feel about that?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite questions because I do a presentation on this topic and really talking about different leadership styles. And a lot of times people are like, well, is it bad for me to feel like a parent? And I'm going to say yes or no. And it depends on your own feelings about it. It's not necessarily bad feeling like a parent or feeling like a leader. If you're not excited about the role that you're playing, you're probably playing it wrong. So if you take this negative connotation, like, oh my gosh, I have to parent them, or you're having that negative language, like, gosh, I have to spoon feed every single little thing to my team. Yeah, that's not great. That's not a great mindset. And that's not showing up as a leader. If you take that parenting approach and you watch someone grow up, or you watch them rise through a challenge and you coach them through it, and you're excited to see their success, I'm going to say, yeah, take some of that pride of ownership of parenting and be like, I helped you on that journey. I know I was there for you. And you get to see them graduate to that next stage, and you get to take that pride of ownership. So that's where I think it's that double-edged sword. It can be negative, but can also be a positive.
Yes, and I think the prior conversation that you and I had in terms of how there is a member of my team who has recently risen through the ranks, and now she's going on to do great things. There is that pride that you do feel, and I mentioned how while that's a very sad day for me and a sad point in my career to have to lose a member of my team, it's kind of fulfilling to know that a person that has been under your leadership that can rise and to do great things. So it's a fantastic conversation that we're having. I'm glad about that. So you
It's
mentioned
what
before that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
it's like watching your kids graduate school, right? It's bittersweet when they leave the house or when they leave the nest or whatever you want to say with it. But you also have that sense of like, wow, accomplishment. And that to me is the best style of leadership. That's when you know you're doing leadership right, is when you want to see your team succeed and possibly even surpass you, right? You get
Right.
to see the next generation, that next group of leaders take it on. And that's still that kind of personal pride of ownership, not ownership, but that personal pride of accomplishment and that
Yes.
support that.
Yes. So you mentioned how there are certain parenting styles that even either mirror or align with leadership styles. So what are those different styles?
Yeah, so I see, I think my favorite analogies, I always like to use some pop culture reference with it, but you have that authoritarian, strict and controlling parent, which oftentimes to be aligns with that dictator style leader. On the other side, you have a neglectful parenting style, which tends to be that laissez-faire style of leader. You have that permissive parent, lenient, avoiding confrontation, letting kids make the rules, which I'm sure you've always seen that the style of leadership as well with that, where it's very much, I say, servant leadership taken to the extreme. And then you have some authoritative parent or authoritarian leader, authoritative parent, and I always misspell it, I apologize, a coaching style of leader. And oftentimes those are the parents and the leaders that are really helping kids and their peer or their teams understand the natural consequences of something. And they're really coaching and guiding them. And all of this is based off of a framework of how emotionally connected are you with them, and how strict or demanding and responsive you are. So if you have high expectations for your team and you're very emotionally connected to them, you tend to fall into that coaching style of leadership. And that's really where you want to be most of the time. If you're less demanding and you don't have a lot of high expectations, that's where you get into that permissive or neglectful parenting style. And if you're less responsive and you're not really emotionally connected to them, that's where you get that dictator style of leader, and often those neglectful leaders or laissez-faire leaders.
Nice. So as leaders, we often have to meet our teams where they are. And I know that with other leadership assessments that we've taken in the past, sometimes if you take the same assessment 2 years away from each other, you'll likely score very similarly because it's how you're wired. So would you say that our business parenting styles will change according to who we're leading at the time, or are we kind of wired a certain way? What have you seen in your research
Ooh,
and studies?
great question. So I'm going to kind of pair two different things with that. One, it sounds like you're talking about situational leadership. And I
Okay.
love situational leadership because that's meeting your team where they're at, on where they are at their journey. I will say that coaching style of leadership or that authoritative style of parenting still meets someone where they're at, because they're asking the questions. That doesn't change along someone's journey. Yes, sometimes they might need a little bit more instruction, but you're still not necessarily staying less emotionally connected to them or letting go of your expectations. Those two things are still remaining constant over the entire situational leadership journey. On the flip side, as you mentioned earlier, I am a DISC trainer. So DISC tends to go with your behavioral styles and your natural tendencies. With that, I do actually like to layer disc on top of this model. It's another 4x4 grid, which a lot of things in professional development and leadership tend to be, or 2x2 grid, sorry.
Mhm.
And that's where you'll have people that sometimes will tend to be into some specific categories. And part of that is in nature versus nurture, right? If you were grown up, going through different environments, if you had leaders and examples and role models, sometimes you tend to mimic those, sometimes you push away with it. But like anything in a disc model or a behavioral style, the way that you're naturally wired does not mean that's the way that you react and respond all the time. And there is opportunity to change that behavior. So oftentimes you'll see that dictator style leader or that authoritarian, that very strict, this is exactly what I say, this is exactly how I do, you must have the marching orders. We've all seen those leaders. We've all had some of those leaders. Sometimes we've even been those leaders. But you can also see that someone evolving that style. It might be their natural tendency, but they can learn tools, they can understand different behaviors as long as there's a willingness. And particularly with a lot of this, at any time you're doing any coaching or professional development, you have to want to change your style. And so that's always kind of that first step with it, but you do have the ability to adjust. Some people are baked in a certain way and they're unwilling or unyielding in that, and they have no desire. They don't see the benefit of it. They don't know the impact that they're having on their team, themselves, and they've got no drive for it. So that's a whole nother conversation. But I will say you typically will lean into one or another style. On the flip side of the chart, if you have that opposite of that authoritarian, that really strict command and control, you've got those permissive, the lenient, avoiding confrontation, letting the kids do whatever they want, wanting to be their friend instead of their parent. I see
Mhm.
a lot of early leaders not understand how to make that transition, and they want to be buddy buddy with their team.
Right,
Doesn't mean that
right.
they're like that all through their career. It does evolve and change as they learn some lessons, as they find some new ways. They understand you don't have to be best friends. Here's how you can still have that strong relationship while holding them highly accountable to expectations. So it is an evolution.
And I imagine that evolution also changes with awareness. Like if we're not aware of how we're being perceived or how we're behaving in the workplace, then it's often we're going to just perpetuate that. So as we become aware of things, then the way we shift to meet the needs of our team will shift as well.
Oh, I love that. And Brittany, I know you and I have both had some long leadership journeys, right? And I'm sure you're looking at it saying the leader I was way back when I started my career is not the leader or the style that I have now. And it
Right.
takes a lot of that awareness. I don't know what helped you along your journey, whether it was some great feedback you were given, whether it was assessments, whether it was whatever it was, some coaching, something that helped you drive that awareness, but you had a desire to learn it. You didn't just take that assessment and say, oh, well, that was cool.
Right. And for me, it was really watching others and then asking myself, do I see that in me? Or seeing the kind of feedback that I would get either once my team started to grow or even when I was an informal leader, because there's leadership is not just supervising, leadership is influence, and
Mhm.
that's all that it is. So just understanding what I see other people and what I see as great examples, what I see as cautionary tales, and trying to use that to inform my own behaviors.
I love that. And that reflection piece is so crucial. And I know you work with a lot of teams of one, being able to kind of stop and say, what did I learn from this situation? How did this affect me, or what was the impact of this? How does that relate to me? Am I doing something? And you're using that constant barometer and those constant questions to continue your journey and to continue that awareness building, because it takes a long time. And it's even if you start building awareness in one aspect, it will not flip overnight. You will
Right.
not start doing things immediately different.
So what closing thoughts would you have for anyone who is very intrigued by this idea that they finally have words to a feeling that they've had for so long? What closing thoughts would you have for anyone who's interested in diving into this a little deeper?
Absolutely. So, if you are looking to, I'll say, evolve your business parenting and to get out of that real frustration that comes with it, there's two different aspects to kind of change that parenting style and get into that more coaching leadership style. And the first is going to be accountability, that yielding to more demanding. Are you setting really great expectations with your teams? Is it really clear? Do they know what's expected of them? How are you communicating and following up with it? That's going to raise the level of expectations and go into that more demanding place. The second side of that grid is really more that emotional connection to someone. Right? How do you go from that disconnected place to that more connected place? And that's really that, empathetic listening, the active listening, asking great questions, expressing genuine concern, showing empathy, that curiosity into someone. So if you're strongly emotionally connected to someone and you have really great expectation setting, you're on your way to much better leadership and much more fruitful business parenting.
Fantastic. Well, Megan, it's been an absolute joy to have this conversation with you today. It's such a fascinating topic. And like I said before, it really helps me to put to words an idea that I've had, but I really never had a way of really describing it. But also not just being able to describe it, but being able to know that there's a way to shift it. And if I see certain behaviors in someone else that I'm leading, or someone else that I'm coaching, or someone else that I'm working with, that I can help them to identify it in themselves as well. So thank you so much for sharing all of this information. So if anyone's watching and they want to learn more about you and how they can work with you in the future, where can they find you?
Absolutely. My website is eleaderexperience.com. That'll have all my contact information there, as well as you can find me on LinkedIn. So that's all on the website at eleaderexperience.com.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Megan, for your time. This has been fascinating, and I'm so, so grateful for your time.
Thank you, Brittany. I am so grateful for the work that you're doing. It is not easy to build up those leadership skills, to lead when you don't necessarily have a team behind you. And that's exactly what it is that you're coaching and supporting people through those transitions. Thank you.
Thank you. That ends our episode of HR Leadership Lessons. Everything we discussed today can be found at talentedteamsconsulting.com. Head to our website to access the show notes, relevant links, and all the resources you need to grow on purpose in HR leadership. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and be sure to never miss future content. Drop us a review and show us some love, and show our guests some love on social media. Thanks again for listening.